Hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for episode 17 of the Matt Mettler Podcast. It is my great pleasure to be here with you today. So a friend of mine had asked me, hey, Matt, not everybody knows as much about all this weed stuff as you do. I don't know if I'm proud of that. I don't know that I'm proud that I know more about weed, but it just so happens that I happen to have a lot of experience in the weed things. So that person asked if I might talk a little bit about the various different kinds of weed and why we do the different things that we do with them, and why we choose different methods and stuff like that. And I got to thinking on it. I was like, that's actually a really good topic, because if you're new to this thing, or, you're interested in maybe perhaps trying cannabis as either for pain management or just because you just want to try it, right? I could tell you a little bit about why you might choose some of the different methods. So traditionally, when we talk about smoking cannabis, or as the powers that be would call it, smoking marijuana, when we're talking about smoking cannabis, essentially what we're talking about is the flower, right? The flower is the buds. The buds are the parts that grow at the internodal spaces on the plant. So every place that a branch comes off of the weed plant, a flower will attempt to grow there. And we cultivate those flowers, and those flowers are the part of the plant that we smoke. We typically aren't trying to smoke the stems, and we typically are not trying to smoke the leaves. Leaves have a very high chlorophyll kind of content and taste to them, and they're unpleasant to smoke. And then also stems and stuff like that they're totally unpleasant because they have kind of a woody kind of quality when you burn them, right? So we're not trying to burn the stems or the leaves. We're just trying to burn the flowers, right? So when we're talking about smoking cannabis as a flower, that's the part that we're talking about smoking, is that part that grows at the internodal space that is the flower of the plant, right? And that's the part that is highly coveted and highly valued and worth its weight in gold. That's the part of the plant that is sought after for certain. Then there's another method that is a much more recent invention, and it's called dabbing. I don't know exactly who coined the phrase dabbing, but I can tell you that dabbing comes from the idea of, it's like Brill cream, a little dab will do you, right? Like, so what'll happen is with dabbing, you are taking a highly concentrated form of cannabis, like an extract or a distillate, and then you're placing that on some kind of tool. And then you're placing that tool on something that is very hot. And it's heated to the temperature where it's going to vaporize the cannabis oil instantaneously upon touching it, but it's not going to burn it. And that's an important distinction between vaporizing and smoking, right? Vaporizing is you're heating the oils, you're heating the terpenes. They're called terpenes in this case. You're heating the terpenes to their boiling points, right? So you're taking an oil and you're heating it up to a certain point, and then it will begin to vaporize all of its own, right? And the idea behind this is that because you're not burning anything, you're not ingesting hydrocarbons. You're not ingesting the burned black hydrocarbons that make up the tar portion of smoking the plant, right? And that is one of the big drawbacks to smoking flower, is that smoking flower does contain hydrocarbons that are not good for you. Now, there's very little evidence that would support that marijuana causes any kind of lung cancer or anything like that. If there is, I've never seen it and I've never heard about it. If I'm wrong on that, somebody please leave me a note or something like that in the comments. But I'm pretty certain that for the most part, we've determined that smoking marijuana is not as bad as smoking cigarettes. I'm not trying to say smoking cannabis is healthy, okay? Smoking things in general is not healthy. So that is one of the things that we've tried to change or eliminate or do differently with all of these new concentrates, is that we're trying to get away from the idea of burning things, and we're trying to move to the idea of vaporizing them so that you're not ingesting hydrocarbons into your lungs, and that way your body doesn't have to try and get rid of those things from inside your lungs. Because anything you put into your body has to try and figure out how to get rid of, right? So the more purified we can make these distillates, and the more plant material that we don't want that we can remove, the better it is, right? The lower the amount of things that you have to ingest to get the effect that you're trying to get to. So that's dabbing, okay? Too much dabbing is not good for you. There are people out there where they are dabbing too much and it can roast your vocal cords because you're inhaling all this hot air. It can end up leaving you with a very raspy kind of sound to your voice if you're dabbing too much. There are people that are dabbing entirely too much, right? If you're dabbing a gram a day or something like that, you've got to seriously check yourself before you wreck yourself. Moderation is the key to all things. So if you're dabbing too much, back off that dab rig because it'll tear you up, all right? And then the next kind of form of cannabis that I'd like to talk about is hashish or hash. Hash is typically thought of as a cannabis product that is made by taking the plants and drying them out. And then once they've been dried for quite a period of time, they are placed onto a piece of silk cloth that's stretched over a bowl, and then they're covered. And then a person takes a pair of sticks and just beats the crap out of it, like they're playing the drums on it, man. They just play the drums on it for a while, and that the beating of the marijuana causes it to oscillate around in there, and it breaks off all the trichromes. The trichromes are the part of the marijuana that we really want. That's the part where the THC is. That's the most flavorful part of the plant, and it has very little plant material in it. So it's highly desirable. You're eliminating all the plant material and just keeping the part that you're really interested in. And hashish was very popular for that reason because marijuana as a plant is very bulky, but hashish as a byproduct of marijuana is not. You could take 100 pounds of plant material and probably break it down into approximately 12 pounds of hashish. Like you can dramatically reduce its size by making hashish out of it. And that's part of why it was so popular, is that it was a great way to preserve the desirable part of the plant without keeping the plant material to go rotten or to go bad. And then also it dramatically reduces the size that it needs in every aspect, transportation, storage, everything, right? So hashish is, when we talk about hashish, that's typically what we're talking about is beaten hashes and traditionally made hashes that are made from the trichromes of the plant and that are made by heating, beating, or pressing them into like a cake or a patty that has kind of a dark color, right? You can also have ice hash, which is made by using ice water to break the trichromes off of the plant instead of using a beating method, right? And what you get there is a form of hash that is very similar in its qualities, but lighter in its color. You shouldn't be afraid of hashish, right? Hashish is actually an upgrade from cannabis. It really is, because you're taking away the part that you don't want to smoke and you're just keeping the part that you're really interested in. And because of that, it smokes very nicely. It has a wonderful flavor to it. It has really nice effects as far as mellowing you out. It's great, right? Next are distillates. Distillates are the most highly purified forms of THC and CBD, and they basically effectively have had all of the plant material removed from them. So they are about as pure as we can get THC at this point. So some of these distillates are so pure, in fact, that the THC crystals will crystallize out of it because it's basically effectively supersaturated. So it will crystal out and it will become just a whole bunch of crystals. Or, this is also what you might find in a syringe. And these usually have a very pure amber kind of honey-esque sort of color to them. Maybe not as dark as honey, lighter in color, but an amber-esque kind of quality to them. And they are very finely refined products, right? And when you vaporize them, they taste amazing. One of the things that is worth noting is that the side that argues against cannabis often likes to talk about how, well, cannabis is much more powerful than it was in 1969, and you could go crazy. And okay, first off, you don't go crazy. Second off, you're right. Cannabis is much more powerful now than it was in 1969. But here's the beauty. You smoke a lot less of it now than you used to in 1969. So a perfect example is in the earlier days of marijuana when we were all smoking Mexican swag and when we were all very happy to just be able to get Mexican swag weed. I used to smoke anywhere from, as a dealer, I had a lot of access to marijuana that most people didn't. As a dealer, I would smoke 5 to 7 grams of Mexican marijuana that I would have to clean every day because it'd have stems and seeds and stuff in it. I would smoke 5 to 7 grams daily, basically, to kind of keep me where I needed to be. And now that I smoke kind buds and distillates and extracts and stuff like that, pretty much less than a gram of weed a day. So I reduced my intake of marijuana 5 or 7 times. Like I reduced the amount of marijuana that I actually ingest 5 to 7 times a day. So there is totally upside to better marijuana. It doesn't take nearly as much, right? A couple of puffs and you're good, or a drag on your pen, you're good to go, right? So it's different than back in the day. I used to have to smoke 2 joints just to really get a good buzz on in the morning, right? Not anymore. No, now I can just, smoke a bowl or something like that and be right there. Like it's that good. So there is definitely upside to having better marijuana because you don't have to ingest as much. And that's something that the opposition never talks about, is that the cannabis is a lot better, but we're smoking a lot less of it, in the sense of the volume that you'd have to smoke to get the same desired results. A lot different. A key element to metabolizing THC is fats. This is part of the reason that when you smoke marijuana or vape marijuana or ingest marijuana, even if you just eat it, you will at some point get the munchies, because that is your body attempting to find fats with which to try and metabolize the THC. And it wants to metabolize the THC, and then it kind of wants to take it and store it off in your fat cells. Right? So that's part of the problem. That's part of why it's so problematic for people, is that THC will be stored in your fat cells when it's done, and it will stay there for a very long time because your fat cells are a storage facility, right, for things. So when you have THC in your fat cells, it takes a long time for it to come out of your body. So it's interesting to note that if I quit smoking tomorrow, I think it'd be a year before really truly urinate without marijuana in my system. I don't even know how long it would be, but I tend to believe it'd be like a year. I've been a cannabis smoker a pretty long time, right? I was also asked about, can I talk about the effects of edibles? Edibles have achieved a new level of popularity, right? A lot of times, in my opinion, edibles do not carry the stigma with them that smoking herb does. Like a lot of people that wouldn't smoke, they would consider trying an edible or tea or something like that, something that isn't smoking. They're actually much more open to that than they would be to smoking. And there's something about the smoking component of marijuana that to this day still has sort of this taboo note to it that for particular groups of people. Now, I think amongst younger people and people that came out of my generation, I don't think that we care. I think that I've been seeing marijuana in the world, cannabis in the world, since I was 16, pretty much. And, it's really not that big a deal. It's really not that big a deal. If I could choose one drug over all the others to advise people to use versus the others, it'd be cannabis, right? Because I think cannabis can help keep you out of trouble. Like it's a lot of people get tripped up and caught up in other harder drugs, and I think that part of the reason that we're doing so well here in Denver and that we're so successful in Colorado is that we allow people to have cannabis, and that makes it so that they don't need those other drugs so much, right? They don't need opioids so much. I wish they didn't need methamphetamine, but one problem at a time. So what kind of effects can you expect to feel when you eat an edible? Typically, I would say that somewhere between a half an hour and an hour, you're going to start to feel it coming on. And when you eat an edible, it does not have the same effect that it has when you smoke. Smoking is nearly instantaneous. Smoking is like you smoke it and then 15 seconds later when you're exhaling it, you're starting to feel it, right? Eating it and ingesting it by mouth is not the same way. So typically somewhere between a half an hour to an hour, you're going to start to feel it. This has to do with what kind of food is in your stomach and when you last ate. Those are going to influence how long it takes to come on and how hard it impacts you. And then the other component to that is if you've had any healthy fats. For instance, if you eat avocado or peanuts or cashews or something like that, those things are going to they're going to give your body the fats that it needs to start to metabolize that stuff. So if you eat an edible that has nuts in it, it is my personal belief that you will feel those edibles more because the nuts are going to help to give you those fats that you need to metabolize it, and that's going to cause you to feel it faster. So that's one of the reasons that you're getting the munchies when you eat an edible. So the effects that you can expect are, and I asked a friend of mine about this because I've been a professional herb smoker for a long time, right? And the effects on somebody who's been using it for a long time are not the same as they are on a beginner, on a noob, right? Noob smokers, and in a way I'm kind of jealous of noob smokers because when you're a noob, you'll come to this point where you start laughing for like 15 minutes. You'll be laughing so hard no sound even comes out, man. I'm going to get a drink. And I'd like to thank JJ. I'd like to thank JJ for sponsoring this Mountain Dew. He brought it to the studio when he came to do his his episode, and I just want to thank you, JJ. This is refreshing and delicious. That's refreshment, baby. Oh yeah, I've had them in the ice now for like a half hour. They're good to go. So 30 minutes to an hour into it, you're going to start to feel light. You're going to start to feel giddy, right? You're probably going to start grinning or smiling or having a tingling near the edges of your eyes, things like that. You're just going to feel light. You're just going to feel good, right? Like it's not going to be some crazy roller coaster, right? The only thing that I can say is that for noobs, one of the things that I used to contend with was I would get paranoid. But see, that was also when things were illegal, and there was a reason to be paranoid when things were illegal. But now that things aren't even illegal, I don't get that so much. And I tend to believe that there's really no reason to be paranoid, especially if you're here in Colorado. If you're someplace else with different laws, okay, I could see that. But the reality is it's more than likely it's going to be just fine. We tend to believe, like, we start freaking out, like worrying about the cops or whatever. Probably not going to happen. If you start getting that feeling, what I'd recommend is find some chips and a 7-Up or a diet drink if you don't drink sugar, and just partake. You'll start to feel better immediately, right? So yeah, that was the only thing that I used to have to worry about a little bit was getting paranoid when I would smoke. But now that doesn't happen anymore. And additionally, only once in a great while do I get the giggles. And when I do, I embrace that, man. I just love when I get the giggles now because there's nothing better or more therapeutic than just like laughing for like 10 minutes straight. Laughing so hard that the sound isn't even coming out, man. And you're just bent over and you're just like in a pose where you're laughing, but there's no noise coming out because you're so into it, right? That's the best. That is the most therapeutic kind of laughter you can ever experience. And when you're a noob to marijuana, you get to enjoy that a few times for sure. As you get more older and you get deeper into it, I don't get the giggles very often, but when I do, they're great and I enjoy it. So those are the kind of effects that you can expect. And then how long will it last? Okay, how long it lasts and how you feel it have everything to do with your body mass, how much food you've consumed, do you have any tolerance to cannabis now? All of those things are going to impact it, right? So, but typically I would say that you're probably going to metabolize it within 5 to 6 hours. I can't imagine it taking much longer than 5 to 6 hours for you to metabolize it unless you really did eat a lot. And even then, your body's still going to metabolize it fairly fast. So the thing to be careful of when eating edibles is that many people will say, I'm not feeling anything. It's been 10 minutes, right? It's been 5 minutes or it's been 10 minutes. They're like, I'm not feeling anything. They eat another one. They wait another 5 or 10 minutes. I'm not feeling anything. They eat another one. Right? I'm not feeling anything. And then by the time it starts coming on them, then it starts to cascade onto them in a way that is more than they were prepared to handle. But the reality is no drug lasts forever. If it did, they wouldn't even have to sell it. Nobody would do it because if you took it and you never came back, nobody would do it. So there's something reassuring in knowing that no drug lasts forever. It always wears off sooner or later. So yeah, if you eat an edible, you're going to feel light. You're going to feel giddy. You might get the giggles. You'll probably get the munchies. And that will probably last The munchies part of it will last until you satiate the munchies, but your high will probably last anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, something like that. And then on the other side of it, you'll probably feel really relaxed and you'll feel probably like you want to take a nap if you're a noob. But for the rest of us, it's really not that big of a deal, right? So yeah, those are the kind of effects that you can expect. And then when you dab, what kind of effects can you expect? When I dab, it tends to be something that I feel more in my brain and less in my body. So it's a very intense kind of brain high and to a lesser extent, a body high. Dabbing is weird because when I first started dabbing, I don't dab very often because it's kind of harsh. I don't think it's very good for your vocal cords. I don't think it's very good for your throat to be inhaling all that superheated air all the time. And it also depends on what temperature you think is enough. So for instance, when you dab, you can use what's called a quartz nail. A quartz nail is made out of quartz glass, and it's traditionally, you're heating it up with a blowtorch. This is another thing that I'm not really keen on dabbing for, is that a lot of different dabbing techniques involve a blowtorch, okay? And part of the reason I don't like that is it's just like, it presents a possibility to set things on fire. It presents a possibility to burn yourself pretty good when you're heating things to the extent that people are when they're dabbing, right? So myself, we use what's called an e-nail. An e-nail is an electronic device that is temperature controlled. And it's really nice. It's got a digital controller that controls the temperature. Me personally, I like it set right at 705. I don't like it hotter than 705 because I think it gets really harsh, but right at 705, I think it's really, really nice. So you can dab at higher temperatures, and when you dab at higher temperatures, what you're doing is vaporizing the oil that much faster and taking like a bigger, more voluminous hit in a shorter period of time. So if you're hardcore and you really have a high tolerance, that's a lot of those kind of people are doing that. Me personally, I really prefer that it's far less harsh. It's far more pleasurable. It's far tastier when you use a little bit lower temperature. So I really like 705. And then one of the things I really like about my dab pen is that it automatically controls the temperature by itself on the inside. I don't even have to think about it or anything like that. So it just kind of gradually heats up to the vaporization point, but never gets above. It'll never take it to burning. That's part of the reason that we're also vaping concentrates, is that they just taste amazing. And then some of the other big, huge benefits, in my opinion, are that vaporizing from a pen is not nearly as stinky as smoking actual flower. And that's a huge upside, because that's one of the biggest telltale signs, or one of the biggest giveaways that you've been smoking, is the funk from smoking flowers, right? Because flowers have a distinctive odor, especially to non-smokers. The vaporization pen seems to have either a quality to it that people don't recognize as cannabis, or they've become so ubiquitous in society now that nobody gives it a second thought. So it has been my experience that when I carry this pen around in places where you wouldn't typically think, like, nobody notices. Nobody even pays any attention to the pen, which is really nice. So from that perspective, it's less stinky. It's less hassle. It doesn't smell like a bowl. Yeah, it doesn't smell like bowls, bongs, all that shit are really stinky. They smell, right? And it's sort of funny because as you become a smoker, you can't smell it so much, right? Like I don't know, either your brain decides that it can't smell it anymore. It normalizes that smell. But to non-smokers, they reek. Right. So it's really nice. Pens and vaporization tools, things like that, are really nice because they don't have the associated funk odor that cannabis as a flower does, which is really nice. I think that pretty much covers it. If you are a person that is considering trying cannabis as a treatment, I encourage you to do so. I'm going to say this: cannabis is not for everyone. I, on occasion, have met people that did not respond very well on cannabis. Like one time I met a guy who turned into a complete moron when he smoked weed, right? So for those kind of people, I don't actually encourage them to use marijuana. For everybody else, if you'd like to give it a shot or give it a try and you're over the age of 21, I encourage you to give it a try. Don't be afraid. It's not going to do the crazy shit that the government tried to sell you on. It certainly isn't going to have any kind of reefer madness type effects where you're going to want to play the piano at a high rate of speed and then continually play faster and faster and faster until you go insane and kill the woman playing the piano. You're not going to do any of that kind of loony stuff, okay? You're probably going to feel really good. You might get the munchies. You probably will get the munchies. You're going to, quite often, you're probably going to laugh or giggle or feel really good and light. And those are the effects that you can expect, okay? And that'll probably last 4 to 6 hours. And then if you smoke it, you'll have a similar effect, but it'll come on much faster and it will wear off much faster as well. So when you smoke herb, generally speaking, herb will not last more than 2 to 3 hours. Even Snoop Dogg's herb will only last 3 hours on a noob. So if you are thinking about giving it a try, there's no reason not to, especially in this day and age. And one thing I've found about Colorado is Colorado's kind of taken a new stance in the sense of, yes, it is possible for employers to discriminate against you for marijuana, but more and more they're not doing that. With the caveat emptor for that being if you're trying to get some kind of job on a government site or doing work with the government, of course they're going to be like, you can't smoke herbs. But there are always ways around that, right? There's ways around that. I put this on BitChute the other day, and something really interesting happened. I had more views on BitChute in 24 hours than I had in a couple of days on YouTube. Now, that either says to me that everybody's moved to BitChute and YouTube is dying, or Google is, in fact, attempting to suppress this show. You know, that's just a strike against Google and a great upside motivator to get me to post on BitChute, because it seems like I'm getting as many views or more views over on BitChute than I am on YouTube. And that ain't right, dude. If I can get as many views on BitChute as I'm getting on YouTube, YouTube's up to some funny business. Let me tell you something, because I should have a ton of views on my videos by now on YouTube. There's millions and millions and millions and millions of people watching YouTube. There's no reason that my videos shouldn't be getting views. So it just makes me think that YouTube is whack. YouTube is really playing some games with people. So I'm glad that there's other places for me to put my videos. Feel free to follow me over on BitChute. Feel free to come over to Minds or Gab or any of the other places that are not Google, that are not YouTube. Feel free to come over there, because apparently those people, they dig on freedom and they dig on people being able to say what they got to say, whether they like it or not. And honestly, I don't think I'm really saying anything that's all that crazy. I don't think I've even said one thing that's super crazy. I know that there's people who'd be like, Matt Mettler, you're whatever. But it's like, dude, you don't know me. You don't know me. You don't know the life that I've lived. I'm not. Whatever you think I am, I'm not. You know? If you think I'm a racist, I'm not, dude. I just don't like ignorant people. But the problem with ignorant people is that they come in every single color, right? They come in every color, right? There's no one particular group of people that has a corner on the market when it comes to ignorant ass motherfuckers. Every group of people has a few. Everybody's got one of those people in their family. You know what I mean? I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. I want to say thank you to all my viewers and watchers and listeners. Thank you for joining me over here. And I really appreciate every single one of you. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment, and talk about it with your friends. And make sure that you join me for episode 18 of the Matt Mettler Podcast. The Matt Mettler Podcast is a Matt Mettler production. Copyright 2019.